Eriwoya,
Eriwoya, ayago ayatọ, Eriwoya.
ẹ jẹ́ agbériwóyà.
Eriwoya, ayago ayatọ, Eriwoya.
Tí n bá ní eriwoya.
Eriwoya, ayago ayatọ, Eriwoya.
Ìtumọ̀ eriwoya.
Eriwoya, ayago ayatọ, Eriwoya.
Òun ni ẹ tẹ́tí ẹ gbọ́ mi.
Eriwoya, ayago ayatọ, Eriwoya.
Òyìnbó ní listen clearly.
Eriwoya, ayago ayatọ, Eriwoya.
Ẹ jẹ́ farabalẹ̀.
Eriwoya, ayago ayatọ, Eriwoya.
Ọkùnrin eriwoya.
Orin ayọ̀, orin Fátuntun, orin ayọ̀.
Obìnrin eriwoya.
Orin ayọ̀, orin Fátuntun, orin ayọ̀.
Ọmọdé eriwoya.
Orin ayọ̀, orin Fátuntun, orin ayọ̀.
Àgbààgbà eriwoya.
Orin ayọ̀, orin Fátuntun, orin ayọ̀.
Ẹni bá gbériwóyà.
Orin ayọ̀, orin Fátuntun, orin ayọ̀.
Ìyẹn àríjẹ́rìmú.
Orin ayọ̀, orin Fátuntun, orin ayọ̀.
Kárí bá ti ṣe.
Orin ayọ̀, orin Fátuntun, orin ayọ̀.
Àwa arọ́ náà gbégbá.
Orin ayọ̀, orin Fátuntun, orin ayọ̀.
Gbogbo ẹni gbériwóyà.
Orin ayọ̀, orin Fátuntun, orin ayọ̀.
Ọmọ ẹ ò níyàn kú.
Orin ayọ̀, orin Fátuntun, orin ayọ̀.
Aya ẹ ò níyàn kú.
Orin ayọ̀, orin Fátuntun, orin ayọ̀.
Ọkọ ẹ ò níyàn kú.
Orin ayọ̀, orin Fátuntun, orin ayọ̀.
Ẹ jẹ́ agbériwóyà.
Eriwoya, ayago ayatọ, Eriwoya.
Ṣẹ́bò ẹ̀ aṣọ́re ní ṣẹ́bórí egungun àtàlà ní ṣẹ́bórí òrùlé adé afúnranjí ẹ̀lùjù tí ó lálàlà tí ó fẹ́ gbà á dirí ìrànjẹ́ òde ò igi ẹ̀lùjù owó táwọn wá ẹ̀lùjù ló wà ìrànjẹ́ òde ò igi ẹ̀lùjù ire gbogbo táwọn wá ẹ̀lùjù ló wà ìrànjẹ́ òde ò igi ẹ̀lùjù.
Àbámọ̀ yóò lè bá o. Àbámọ̀ yóò lè bá. Àbámọ̀ yóò lè bá o. Àbámọ̀ yóò lè bá. Kò máa sẹ́ni méjì mọ́tò ń jẹ ọ̀sẹ̀ àwòkù. Àbámọ̀ yóò lè bá.
Orin bá ti kúrò ní àyà o, ẹ̀mí àgbọ̀ mi ẹ̀yin èèyàn o. Orin bá ti kúrò ní àyà, ẹ̀mí àgbọ̀ mi ẹ̀yin èèyàn o. Tó bá jẹ́ ká ṣe eré Ifá, ọ̀gá mi Ifá nìyí ọ̀sẹ̀ àwòkọ́. Tó bá jẹ́ ká ṣe eré Ifá, ọ̀gá ní Ifá nìyí ọ̀sẹ̀ àwòkọ́. Orin Ifá tó gbéjú owó tí kì í ṣe kórìn máa rí máa kọ́ o. Orin Ifá tó gbéjú owó tí kì í ṣe kórìn máa rí máa kọ́ o. Bẹ́ẹ̀nìyàn ò bá ronú jìn, bẹ́ẹ̀nìyàn ò bá ronú jinlẹ̀ kó lè bá wa kọ́.
Kò lè bá wa kọ́ o. Àbámọ̀ yóò lè bá o. Àbámọ̀ yóò lè bá. Àbámọ̀ yóò lè bá o. Àbámọ̀ yóò lè bá. Kò máa sẹ́ni méjì mọ́tò ń jẹ ọ̀sẹ̀
Show you like snail on a fresh bush meat to Sade go order your own. Yeah, yeah. Make you go order your own. Sade go order your own.
Ayé ti wá dáadé báyìí o. Ṣé àwọn àgbà bọ̀ wọ́n ní bí ebi bá kúrò nínú iṣẹ́ ti bùṣe. Èyí ló mú àjọ adójútẹ̀bí ni Àkànní Akànjí farm pèsè àwọn èrè oko fún jíjẹ ní ìrọ̀rùn láìsí àbàwọ́n kan àti ìnira rárá. Àwọn èrè oko bíi àgbàdo, ẹ̀gẹ́, iṣu, ewébẹ̀ àti àwọn èso lóríṣiríṣi, ẹran ìgbẹ́, ẹja odò, ìgbín àti bẹ́ẹ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ lọ. A tún ń ta àwọn ohun jíjẹ fún àwọn oníbàárà wa tí wọn kò bá náwó lọ́wọ́ lásìkò àti ra oúnjẹ lọ́dọ̀ wa, ṣùgbọ́n tí wọn ó sì ṣe ìlérí wípé wọn yóò san owó náà padà kété tí wọ́n bá ti rí owó náà níparí oṣù. Pàpàǹbarì rẹ̀ ni wípé a tún lè kó èyíkéyìí nínú àwọn èrè oko lọ káàkiri àgbàlá ayé. Ẹ̀yin ẹ ṣáà ti kàn sí wa lórí ẹ̀rọ ìbánisọ̀rọ̀ Àkànní Akànjí farm 08034564577 àti 09077901303. Àkànní Akànjí farms àwa fún yín lọ́jọ́kọ́jọ́.
Tẹ̀síwájú ọmọ ire àtọ̀hún tó dára. Ọmọ òkè bọ̀ sípò ẹ̀tọ́ rẹ̀. Ìwọ ni ìmọ́lẹ̀ ògo àdúrà. Great. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Once again, I welcome you in the name of Olodumare. If you're in Clubhouse, you will be listening only. Please put your comments in the chat section. We may be able to get to it as we go on. And if you're on Twitter, kindly tweet with the hashtag Yoruba Women. That would be greatly appreciated. Today is a salute to the Yoruba women in leadership from historic times. Here with me today, I have Adeolu. He's going to be a contributor. So, host, if you can send him a co-host invitation, and also if you can let Yoruba Goddess speak as well. I'm not sure that she would like to speak, but if she wants to, please make her a speaker. Again, my name is Dr. Bukola, and I'm going to try to do my bit on Salute to Yoruba Women today. My salute goes to the Yoruba ancestors, all our ancestors, both male and female. I salute to Ile, Okere, Afokonyori. Salute to the women, both of my age, those that are older than me, those that are younger than me, those that are still in the womb, and those that are coming in the future. Today, this room is particularly dedicated to Fumi, Yoruba Goddess. This room is dedicated to her for her strength, her resilience, her intellectual Yoruba nationalism. This woman, she's at every single Yoruba rally that they've ever held in the UK. She's an active member of the Yoruba nationalism movement. Her service is impeccable. She's fearless, vocal, bold, and strong. Not very many people know my face here, but you see, that's her face out there. She is the true definition of what it means to be a strong Yoruba woman. And I'm dedicating this room to her for all the insults that might have come our way through all her activism in towards Yoruba nationalism. She's not. We're going to do this because our experience is not unique. This is the experience that is very common to most women that dare to challenge the status quo. And I'm going to look at it from the perspective of Yoruba women. The goal of this room is to facilitate better relationship between females and male in Yoruba nationalism, and also to make us remember who we are as a people, and also do better so that we can achieve what we wanted to do. I'm also hoping that this room will remind us, it will revitalize the respect for women that is needed to restore the order in Yoruba land. As I go through some of my notes here, we will see that the respect for women in Yoruba culture is very important from the onset. If we don't do that, it makes our life very difficult, actually. And I'm also hoping that we will understand how to deal with the female force better and also create a good balance. This room is not to bash our men. This room is not to bash Yoruba men. Yoruba men are our strength. They are our father. They are our backbone. We cannot do without them. This discussion may be tense, but it is very, very necessary. And please, I will put out a disclaimer. I am not an historian. All I did was just do some studies to try to do some discussions here today. So, a brief historical assessment. So I'm going to mention some great Yoruba women from time immemorial, from history. I think the number one is Oshun, the primordial. I'm going to talk about our primordial mothers. Oshun is our great ancestor. And we knew from Yoruba history, from the Oduifa Oshetura, which is the chapter 17, that when Olodumare created the world, he sent 17 of the deities, which were the 17 ones, the very first one that came. And actually, I think before the Irumole came. So she was the only female among them. She was the number 17 among them. And originally, the men, being men, they wanted to do everything by themselves. They didn't really bring her into the fold of things. But they realized that nothing was going the way it should be. There was barrenness in the land. There was poverty in the land. Things were not going the way it should be. So they went back to Olodumare and said, Olodumare, you gave us a job to do. Why? What is going on here? And Olodumare said to them, what about the woman that was among you guys? And they were like, yeah, she's there. Olodumare said, why don't you go back to her and try to figure out what's going on? And lo and behold, she was able to help them. You can have so many keys in your hand, but you need the very first key of your main house to get in the door, and then be able to access other rooms in the house. That's the best way I can think of the role of a woman in the Yoruba world. And we can never forget also the great women in our primordial time. Oya comes to mind, a very strong woman that was behind the success of our King Shango at the time. Also a very powerful force in the Yoruba pantheon of Orishas. We cannot forget Ajay Olokun. We cannot never forget that. That is the center of our commerce. It's in the form of a woman. And of course, the Yami, They hold the secrets to the world. They are said to be the one that is looking after the throne of Olodumare, depending on which sources you look at. So we can never underestimate the role of women when it comes to Yoruba. And I'm hoping that we will retrace some of these steps back and make some adjustments so that our life might be better. When we keep looking, we look at Oduduwa's dynasty, nobody can ever forget the role that Moremi Ajasoro played in the existence of the Yoruba today. She paid the ultimate price. I like to tell our people, don't ever call yourself Moremi. I don't know how many women today can make the sacrifice that she made that time. Because literally, if she didn't do that, perhaps we would no longer be Yoruba today. Most of us are very familiar with the story of Moremi. She not only surrendered herself, let go of all her wealth as a queen, and so reduce herself to the level of a slave. To be, she allowed herself to be taken away as a slave, and also served as a slave for some time in the palace of the king that she went to try to infiltrate that kingdom, and also was married to that king to be able to set her people free. And lastly, she gave her only child in this whole world as an offering to compensate the water god for a safe return. So when you talk about giving your body, your soul, your spirit, your sweat, everything, that woman, she gave everything. She gave everything. And also, even our great Oduduwa was birthed by a woman. So we can never underestimate the value of women in society. And I used to say that, when somebody disparage a woman that they think that is very active, Moremi always comes to my mind, because some of the things that they'll call a woman, she's the embodiment of everything. So we'll talk about some of this as we go on. So I'm going to move to the pre-colonial times and talk about our Yoruba women of the time. I want to talk about the way that perhaps the best time in history for Yoruba women was during the pre-colonial times, actually, and the primordial times. I think after that, the value of women in Yoruba society seems to be on the decline, for reasons that, is debatable. As we go on, we can argue about it. So I want to say that the pre-colonial Yoruba women, and please feel free to disagree and voice your opinion about this. These women were independent and self-sustaining women. A lot of literatures, if you look at it, they talk about the way that these women were economically, they were stable, financially stable, I will call it. And the role of women in Yoruba culture was not that of a competition. They were, no matter, these women were, even though they were financially stable and all that, they were never like the type that go against their spouses, the Yoruba men. They still hold a lot of respect to their men. For Yoruba, the women were considered to be the economic powerhouse of the Yoruba country. They do all kind of sales. They run the markets. Even till today, women still hold the marketplace in Yoruba land. I have not found that in any other places around the world. And one of the things I will talk about when we get to that point was I'm concerned about the future of that particular culture as the world continue to change. Women in Yoruba at the time, they monopolized some trades like, clothes dyeing, the adire, cloth making, weaving, ashoke, food processing, or, making of vegetable oil, bakery, bread making, bead making. Lots and lots of women were involved in this. And pre-colonial time, the women were trading in ammunitions. This is where you have women like, Madame Tinubu and Efunshiton Aniwura. They were known as arm dealers at the time. They trade with the Europeans. People like to talk about them that, they sell slaves. That was not the only thing that they were selling. They actually were trading actively. The very first trade they were having with the Europeans were with goods, products that we were producing, manufacturing in Yoruba land. Yoruba land was so huge in manufacturing at the time that it was described that like almost 50% of Abeokuta was filled with factories that were making adire. And these clothes were being sold throughout most of the North Africa area. So it was a very vibrant economy that was really the backbone of that economy were the Yoruba women. Also, okay, I'm going, sorry, I'm getting distracted by the text messages coming in. And also, our women at the time, they were, part of their trade was so extensive. They travel in caravans, like almost like 100 size people will walk for miles. Sometimes they will walk to places that will take them up to a month to get to this location to do their trade. In addition to that, from what I found out, the women were not, especially aristocratic women, were not particularly working in the farm, but they were the ones that were responsible for the farm products, for selling those farm products. And after they sell it, they give the money back to their spouses. Okay, for example, even the coin, they sell things and they bring the proceeds back to the palace. I just found out going through Akinwumi Ogundiran's the Yoruba New History, that the queen, even at the time, they will carry the basket on their head just like anybody else would do, and they will travel far. They will get access to the market before other people does, because that's the king's product. So in those days, Yoruba kings have their own source of income, and their women were very, very pivotal because, of course, our king is not going to go to the farm or go to the market and sell these things. So his wives play a critical role in making sure that he gets some returns from some of these things. And I don't need to tell us that our women were they were the obstetricians of those days. They deliver all the babies at the time. And we know a lot of women actually that specializes in that. Women that are Oshun worshippers, or the Yeye, or Elewe Omo, or the Yabiyes. These were the very first obstetricians before we have what we have today in the form of Western medicine. And can I tell you also that they were scientists? Because somebody was telling me the other day, even though I'm a physician, what I'm trained to do as in obstetrics, when we deliver babies, you lay on your back. Our mothers used to lay on their knees. And it's fascinating because I met a young man recently that told me that, do you know that there are studies going on that the birth positions that our mothers have found out in those days when they go on their two knees was actually better in terms of, giving birth, that it has better outcome, it gives more room to the baby to come out, and it offers, less complication. And, I was sitting there and I'm like, wow, how come I never thought of it? So they were brilliant, brilliant women. I don't know how many of our women go on their knees. I surely wasn't on my knees giving birth to my kids. But you see, these were women that were equipped with special knowledge from Olodumare, even at that time, that their skills is actually better than what we have today. And also, so social political, pre-colonial Yoruba women, they were women to be envied, honestly. These women were economic powerhouse. I've mentioned some of the things they were doing that time. They were very strong in terms of their social political roles. For example, Oduduwa granddaughters, the children founded the Ketu and Owu kingdoms. Alaafin Ajaka had a wife that was banished, and his daughter named Pupupu. And you guys can correct me if I don't say it correctly. She was the founder of Ondo State. That is how strong and powerful our women were. And I was just even reading through on Akin Guduron's book. He was talking about even how up to today in Ondo State, they were able to retain that role that women played in installing the king there. So maybe when I get a chance, I'll look at that again and say it appropriately. And for those of you that know, please feel free to educate us a little bit more. And we can never talk about the socio-political roles of our Yoruba women without actually talking about those of them that were actually kings. Because in Yoruba, what we have is Oba, and it's genderless, really, until some people start saying Obabirin. But really, it's just Oba. You can only be Oba, and there is no other word for it, And there were so many, actually, I didn't know. I only knew a couple before. But apparently there were so many Yoruba women that were kings during that time. Starting from Ile-Ife, King Luo was known at the time, and she was credited with constructing a lot of roads and kind of converting Ile-Ife to like a kind of metropolis, really. She constructed a lot of roads, connected Ife to other places. In Oyo, the very popular Oronkoto was known. She was described as the person that had over 1,000 armies. She had like over 1,000 cavalries, 1,000 infantry. She was known for a strong military, pro-military base of Oyo, and she was very, very pivotal in putting Oyo to build Oyo as a strong empire. In Ijesha, they had about 6 kings that were female, and the last one was the 18th Owa. She was called Yeyori. In Ijebu-Ode, there were 3 princesses that became kings in the 1700s. Orejeje was the 23rd Awujale. Oregeje was the 31st, and there was one that is called Rubakoye. She was the 37th Awujale. For some reason, they stopped making women king. That's going to be a story for another day. I don't want to talk about that today. I just want to salute the women for the things that they have done. So Ado actually had a lot. They had the fifth Ewi of Ado was called Yeye Nirewu, and she ruled for 41 years. She was said to have became a king through some kind of subterfuge, but eventually she warmed the heart of the people. She ruled between 1511 to 1552. In Akure, there was a Ejiaro, or maybe it's Ejiaro. It was reported that she lasted for about 150 years. It is debatable though. There was also Ejemoin. I'm not sure if I'm saying the name right. She was the 26th Deji of Akure. So let me pause here. I wanted to start talking about, or maybe I'll just run through some of these and then let my co-speakers kind of buttress some of these to salute the women. Our Yoruba women of those days were also political leaders. They, like, part of the thing that I said, that the Yoruba women, our role is not a competition to Yoruba men. It is a complementary role. I think that nobody exemplified this better than what the Ayaba does in those days, because it is said that as big as the palace is, as much the Ijoye that you have, you cannot see the king without the consent of the Ayaba. So they are like he's the guard of the guard. They're the one that is closest. They're the one that is next to him there. And there was so much respect that the elders accorded to them, regardless of your role in the palace. You will still have to you still go through the Ayaba to see the king. I don't think that's the same thing today. And of course, I always talk about this with some of my friends, that I respect our Yoruba culture a lot, because they understood so many things in terms of gender roles, to the point that they realized that they need to create a women court on its own, because men and women are not the same. We don't really think alike. We have to do a lot of things together, but there are some things that will be normal in the court of men that's not normal in the court of women. It only makes sense if they have their own court. So that is why you have the fantastic role of Iyalode that was, created by our ancestors at the time, which pretty much is the chief of staff of the women in the political arena. In Ondo, that is what they call the Olobun. That's the Olobun, or maybe Olobun. For those of you that are Ondo, please let me correct that spelling. I think that's the role, that particular role in Ondo till today is still preserved, And of course, Iyalode is still preserved, but Iyalode has become more of a social ceremonial thing than it should be. Somebody was asking for the title of the book. So one of the books that I used was Akin Ogundiran, The Yoruba, A New History, and that book is dense. It's dense. It's dense for so many things. So also, like I was saying, the lead women court was Iyalode, and also also when you go to the court, the court arena, the Oshugo, they have the women there as well that plays their role as well. Okay, what did I wanted to say? Yeah, so I've talked about that in terms of the lead women court. And I talk about the fact that our women were involved in the judiciary, the Oshogbo, also in the coronation of the kings. There were specific Yoruba women that they were the one that is tasked with that role in performing some last rituals for the Yoruba, any Yoruba king to ascend the throne. So all of this did not come by accident. It didn't come by accident. And if you look at it, Yoruba women also, after the fall of the Oyo Empire, actually it appeared that they became kind of stronger. And the women that exemplified this the most was Madam Tinubu and Eforo Tinubu and Efunsheta Aniwura, and a third woman which I rarely know about, which is called Ya Omosa in Ibadan. These women, they were very, very important in the time of the colonial times, because after the fall of the Oyo Empire, because they have accumulated so much wealth, because the Yoruba women hold the economic powerhouse, the financial capital of the Yoruba land. These women, they were rich women, and their trades also involved the selling of ammunitions. So these were the women that were buying ammunitions from the West and actually supplying it to their men to go to war. So their role, the women role, after the fall of the old Oyo Empire, actually became more of, they actually have to ensure that their men were fine, that their men were okay, that their men have enough ammunition to go to war with. Omosa was credited as the first person that sold the Snyder rifle, and she was she also did something very, very brave, because when Ibadan was engaged in the war with Ekiti, apparently the Ijebu forces, because a lot of, in fairness, a lot of Ijebu lands was claimed by Ibadan. So some Ijebu forces were trying to come back and chase Ibadan back, and these women raised an army that pushed back on the Ijebu while Ibadan was facing the war in Ekiti. So I cannot talk about these great women without saying some things that they did that people thought were maybe not the best. Madam Tinubu was notoriously, most people, I think if you say Madam Tinubu, what they will say about her is that, oh, she was a slave trader. This is all they know about her. That's not true, actually, because this woman traded in everything you could think of. And let's not forget, during the time of this slavery, so many things was going on in our land that time. Some people were raiding us and selling our people. What will you do to your enemy if you catch them? I'm not excusing whatever she had done that time, but I can't imagine if she was selling Fulani at the time, or maybe she was selling the Daomi people that pretty much raided the whole of Egbaland and almost wanted to turn them extinct. I can't imagine if this were the people Tinubu was selling. And she was one of the very first abolitionists at the time as well that stopped the slave trade. Something that happens to her, people did not realize this, that the British actually expelled Tinubu from Lagos. They went to her, faced her with cannons, because she was not making it easy for them to take over Lagos. And after they took over Lagos, that was the first place that they established their territory in our land. The defeat of that woman alone was part of the reason why it was, business, how they pretty much set to shop in our land. She died in, of course, when they faced her with cannon in Lagos, she escaped to Abeokuta and she became the Iyalode Egba. I don't think there was ever any other Iyalode that were as strong as Tinubu and Ifushetan anymore. Their era, once those women died, that era just ended. Madam Tinubu died in 1877. And let's not forget, she also was very pivotal to the Egba people after she moved there. Otherwise, Daome would have perhaps we wouldn't have Egba today, because Gizo was just, they were just raiding Egba people anyhow. So I'm going to continue. I've mentioned Madam Omosa, what she did in Ibadan. And I think I will never leave this spot without talking about Efunshetan Aniwura. Efunshetan Aniwura was, this story to me, a lot of people, when you hear about Efunshetan, you hear that she was a wicked woman, she was killing a slave, the story of Akiwumi Shola, which Baba, he later, revisited that story. But sometimes people only hear the first part, they don't hear the second part. His attempt to review the damage he had done about Efunshetan's story, most people did not catch up to the follow-up. But I knew that before he died, he tried to review some of the things that he said about her when he understood that story better. Because I'm just going to highlight some of the things she did. This woman was literally, at the time, she was said to have over 2,000 slaves. She had her own private militia that worked for her. She had large farms, large, housing estate, name it. In Ibadan today, if you go to their Agbole, Agbole Efushetan, it's a very big place. And a lot of people still live there till today. And this woman clashed at the time with the Are Latosha at the time, who was the generalismo at the time. And the reason why she clashed with him was because She said, "You're waging too much wars." This is when he was warring with the Ado people. She was like, "This is enough. You waged so much wars. We need to stop this thing." And she withdrew her support. Remember, she was the powerhouse because they were using her money to fund the war. So she withdrew from that. And as a result of that, Latusha planned and sent some assassins to her. And, you know, what happens after that? She was assassinated in 1874. Okay, thank you. I heard you, Mr. Bunker. So Madame Efisheton was assassinated. Maybe she was assassinated, maybe she poisoned herself. Nobody knows. The bottom line was that she died in 1874. And, you know, how did the war ended? Ibadan was not able to finish what they started in Ekiti. Everybody eventually went home, right? After they decimated each other. And actually, that war to me, you know, was not necessary. That Yoruba war that lasted 16 years was the time when we were supposed to be fighting the British. We were fighting each other. And we all ended up being what? Taken as slaves. Our land was cut into pieces by foreigners. So she was right, in my opinion. Maybe Latosha should have listened to her. And colonial rule. So after all the era of these great women, of course, when they died, they are, you know, that was the end of an era. You know, then comes in the era of the colonial rule. And I think, you know, it started again in 1851 was when the colonial rule started, when they, you know, took Lagos in 1851. Remember that Madame Tinubu died in 1877. This was after she was kicked out of Lagos in the 50s. And then she went to Egba. So they didn't really, the European really didn't really take us until like the 1890s. So after all these great legends died, that's when they really just got hold of us and they were just, you know, taking whatever. So during the colonial era, I'm going to mention, I want to talk about some of the things that the disadvantage that Yoruba women faced that time that led to that continuous decline in Yoruba women's status. But maybe I'm going to let some of my speakers, you know, talk. And then after that, maybe I'll get back to the First Republic. I wanted to mention some women there, up to the point of what we're doing today. Even we're going to talk about the Yoruba women that participated in ADECO and OPC, and the Yoruba women that are in the forefront of Yoruba nationalism today. And that includes my sister, Fumi. So, Mr. Ade, are you ready? Ade?
Yeah.
Do you want to say one or two things before I go on?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to. Can you hear me very well?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I just wanted to draw. Thank you very much for bringing up this point, and I also am very, very glad that there are so many men in the group. So very, very good, which shows that we are true Yoruba people, because oftentimes somebody who specializes on gender studies and African studies, social and cultural critique, most of the time, women oftentimes avoid participating in activities that pertain mentioning gender or women. And one of the reasons is because we feel that, oh, feminism is this, feminism is that. Of course, feminism, most of the feminine people who claim to be feminists actually brought this concept from the West. And the premise of the West is that women have been suffering for centuries and so on and so forth. But we Africans have different concerning women. So, yeah, let me to go straight to the point. I just wanted to draw attention to maybe one or two things. One of it is I would like to ask the question, what are the source of women's power in Yoruba land or in Yoruba history? And I want to start with the word you mentioned, Iyalode, which is a very, very interesting concept. And, you know, when we talk about Iyalode, what we think is that, well, Iyalode is a concept that our people have been creating long time immemorial, and it's also a division of women's goals to respond to women's problems and challenges. This is partly true and partly untrue, I'd say, and citing the historical perspective, we need to ask ourselves, when did the concept of Yalode begin in Yoruba land? The concept of Yalode began in 19th century, and that towards the middle of the 19th century. And as a matter of fact, as you mentioned, Madam Tinubu of Abeokuta was the first Yalode in the Egba land, and the Fushetani Wura was the second Yalode in Ibadan. And these two cities, or probably three of them, were the ones that began this concept of the Yalode. And for instance, we didn't have that concept in Oyo, and we didn't have that concept in among the Ife that had this even much older, what do you call it? Because you also remember that in Ibadan and Abeokuta also that actually other Yoruba regions were actually way more metropolitan than they were in the 19th century. So now, this is why what made me ask this question: what are the roles of women before we started the concept of the Yalode? So I will just draw attention to three things. And then one of the first one, I will try to talk about the Yalode shortly when I finish, but I just wanted to draw attention to three functions, or the history, or the source of power of Yoruba women pre-colonial period. And one of them is lineage and descendants. This is the place where women actually get power source. And how do they get this power? In Yoruba concept, we have Eba, Aburu, Agba, Omode. So all of these are genderless. And therefore, if you are the eldest, you are actually get more the older you are, and that's why if you have not read, if you're a woman, you have not read Yoruba woman, you have not really read then you are not a woman. So
I have that book. I have the book.
So it's a powerful text that is highly criticized, yet she actually brings up a lot of things. I mean, she's not 100% what you call it. Many people criticize her, but when you are reading through it, you get that even many of what she says is some of the things you can relate with on daily basis because she's a sociologist. She draws attention to this lineage concept, and that's why she says Yoruba don't do gender. Well, it depends on how you do. You can describe gender, but what she's trying to say is that age actually are social basis of Yoruba relations. Age and status. So age in this case means that the eldest gets the prerogatory or a kind of respect from the senior. And you should also remember that if you are a person that joined a household, a lineage, whether you are a man or woman, you are automatically a junior to babies that were born even 1 hour before you join that lineage or that household. You are a junior to that household. And this is why the concept of wife, that even wife, for example, usually called even children, they call them Baba, Ya, or Egbo, but never their first name because they have to respect them. And some wives invent certain metaphors or beautiful words, something Agbaki or something like that, for young members of the lineage, so that they don't just call them as they always titles. So if you're like Oyewumi, even as that 1970s, 1980s, when Oyewumi was doing her research in the Oyo-Ogbomoso area, she actually found Olori Ode that were female. She found Baale that were female. Now the question is, how did these women get this position? They got it by being a descendant or members of a household. So, like the Olode she interviewed, the Olode said that the Olode people, when her father was the Olori Olode, or Oluode, so to say, they call it Olode in Ekiti, but I don't know what they call it in Oyo. So, they said that her father was Oluode, and then when the father passed away, the Olode came to appeal to her that the Ifa chose her, but she rejected it. She said, no, I can't do such thing, this and that, in the midst of men and co, but she knew how to use God, of course. So, she herself started seeing her father in dreams, so that the father encouraging her to go and replace him. So these are, we will say, lineage based or descendants based. And like Obinna Akanshi greatly makes it clear that virtually all Yoruba society had women monarch. At least before the 19th century, we have many societies with women monarch. And even in the 19th century, Madam Tinubu was not the only woman that was dealt with in Yoruba land. There were many women that were dealt with. For instance, when they were creating Lagos, they're part of Lagos that a European went to, these colonial officials, and they were sad that the monarch of that place, of that Eco side, was always women. So they said, okay, we will wait till the one that is there now passes away. Then when they choose another one, then we will take over because we want to relate with men, not with women. Of course, they were also Victorian. This men, masculine, patriarchal way of seeing things. So when the woman passed away, another woman was chosen to become a monarch. Then you both said, no, we don't agree. So they asked to appeal. Okay, who is the most senior male in this group? So they started relating with this most senior male, and later they unstood that woman and then replaced her with a man. So all of these things actually happened. And so my point here is that we have this lineage base and descendant base, and even my own town was founded by a woman. And up to today, we still have women figure there. So I think what happens here is that it is okay. I will go to the next one before I talk about how they function. So the second one is spiritual and mythical way of strategy, and in this case, we have female priestesses, and I think Yoruba, and like some African societies, are one of the most amazing ways of seeing God, either male or female or integration of both in one person, but never a male, this patriarchal or this male way of saying God. So in Yoruba, that's why Olodumare, we don't like saying Olodumare is God, because then you are talking about a man. But the way the Yoruba describe Olodumare, they are not even talking about man or woman. They are talking about somebody that includes everything and is all overall. So when you use the English form of God, then you have actually limit Olodumare. You have shrunk Olodumare. So that is the second form. And then we have priestesses like Obiaka. She mentioned the case of Oshun, and we have many Yoruba, what they call. In fact, sometimes a deity in Oyo might be a male. Then you go to somewhere in Jesha, then the person might be the deity, the same deity with the same name might be a female. It happens all the time. The other day I was listening to something like it in my town. Enyile was a female. Enyile is a female. It's worshipped as a female. But in some parts, it's worshipped as a male. And in my town, where they worship her as a female, they still see her as hunter and somebody who helps during war and stuff like that. So it's about function, not about the sex. Then the third form is the social and honorary form of women. In this case, talking about successful women that gain certain positions or honorary positions in society. And this is where the concept of Iyalode developed. So in other words, the Lobo in Ondo is not the same as Iyalode of somewhere. Iyalode is mother or minister of public affairs. Actually, it's not more or less the leader of women, because she ensured the trade. Because if you know the Yoruba concept of market is the place where the physical and the spiritual intersect. And market is also a place where many things meet. So in Yoruba town, a monarch does not become a monarch without passing through the market. You are doing your ceremony, naming ceremony or any ceremony. If you have not reached the market, you have not done ceremony. So market is even beyond the place where you buy and sell, as in English terminology. And that's why I'm extremely not a fan of translations. I usually use the words directly rather than translating, because you translate then you shrink it for somebody who is non-Yoruba. So this when a woman is honored because she becomes important because of her achievements, and that's where the concept of Iyalode started. For example, was not even an indigenous of Ibadan. She was an Egba woman who had migrated long time ago, and then I've been doing business, but she didn't migrate she was not brought there. She came as an adult. Moved in there and started trading, and she became Iyalode. And I've also come across several Iyalode or Iyaloja who were not native of the town where they were appointed, but rather they were married into that town. They decided to stay, or because of more or less because of their achievement. And Iyalode was not, I don't know about other towns or whether it's Iyalode is not originally lineage based. It's not descendant based. In other words, it's not that they choose a certain household, but positions like Lobon, like Arishe of Ijesha land, like Iyelobinrile of certain Yoruba towns, I think Ekiti and Ijesha also use that word. Iyakere of Oyo, these were chosen from certain households. They were not chosen anyhow. And it's not because it's actually more ritual, more spiritual, and more lineage-based and descendants-based. And these are the old versions of women's positions in Yoruba land. And their function was not limited to women. It's also limited to the public. But my point here is that it's like, this concept of Oba, how, it has like a Lobo has origin, its migration, that these are the people they founded the town and the position remain. So if you go to the present Lobo and you say, who is the Oba? You say, oh, Oba is my son, Omomi Loba. Oba is my child. Because she's supposed to be the senior and Oba is supposed to be the junior. The same affected my town when we have the Yelobi Rinde. The person is the kind of great woman, so to say. And then we have 6 chiefs, Warefa, who usually salute the monarch. When they salute the monarch, usually this woman doesn't join them. And if she's going to join them, all the chiefs, 6 high chiefs, they will bow. This woman never bowed, and she never looked at the monarch in the eyes. She turned her side. She rolled her eruation, I don't know what they call this thing, horse tail or something like that. She rolled it,
Okay.
and then, yes, she rolls it, and then the monarch will say, Kweyo, that is Keyo, is it's an honor. So they don't really look at each other. And then every position, when they are chosen, they appoint her as a monarch. And all the rituals they do for the monarch to wear the crown, she also does her own. Exactly the same thing. Only one thing is different, which I will not mention publicly. So the point here is that it's the same. But Yaloja and Yaya, don't do all these things. And secondly, one thing that is also unique with all these women with this traditional Ua or ancient title position is that they are not expected to be in a husband's house. And this brings me to the concept of husband's house. That is, they are not supposed to be under the roof of a husband. I'm not saying they are not supposed to have mating, What used to happen in those days is that the man that would come to them, not the other way around. And this is very common. I don't know about other Yoruba or Yoruba princesses. All these years, pre-19th century, they didn't go to a man's house to sit there because they will become wife and they will become junior. And the position they carry, they are not supposed to become junior. So they are supposed to own their own household. But they give birth. It's a man that will come to them. And if the man is an important person, then the man just, they know how to meet. But not that, the man might not see it. But if the man will not with great titles, like also a prince or a chief, then he might stay within her household. So all of these things are functions or the differences between the old concept and the new concept. So I will just go straight now. Maybe we might talk about that a little bit more later. I will go straight to the intersection. I've mentioned the 3 concepts of Yoruba power: the lineage or descendant base, the spiritual or mythological base, and the social or honorary. So I will just talk quickly about the intersections of women's power. That is, factors that affect their power. I think Oblia wants to talk about it. I will just touch it briefly. Or that
Yes, touch it briefly. Then after that, we'll go to Mr. Bunka. Go on.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. So the 3 factors that promote or sometimes demote them is their role in the historical conditioning. And the historical condition is, for instance, the colonial, the change of weather, change of many things, and during the transatlantic slave trade, it also affects many women because the transatlantic slave trade, the ratio of men to women in demand was 3 to 1. They prefer men to go and work on the plantations. They only prefer women sometimes to do other things. That's their own concept. So there were more women, and then this concept led them to change them to accumulation of wives. So some people will say, well, we African practice polygamy. Polygamy is not culture. Polygamy is a functional based, what they call it. So we practice it, but not something that, if you have only one wife or something, there will be problem or something. I've never heard about things like that. But some of this accumulation of 100, 200, 300, 400, what they call it, of women began in 18th, 19th centuries here among the Yoruba. It could go higher in 19th century. I'm not saying it didn't happen before. But when you look at the myth of Oya, Osho, and Ku, you will hear that they have more than one male spouse. So it happens among both men and women in those days. But later, in it's more common to men than to women. So And that's just one of it. But we also have Islam and Christianity, whereby women were supposed to come out of men, not the other way around, because the Yoruba believe that man comes out of women, not the other way around. So all of this also limit their own, what do you call it? Number two is craft and trade. So it also deals with the historical conditioning that affects their trade and their source of economy. And when these are affected, it also limits their economic power. And when economic power is limited, let's face it, whether 1,000 years ago or now, economy plays vital role in the depiction of power. And then the third and the last one that I will just mention briefly is the concept of wife, husband. In Yoruba concept, both men and women can play the role of social wife or social husband. But gradually, it shifted to women becoming more social wife, more wife than husband. And please, I'm not using the English because aya, oko, yawo, oko. I'm not using the concept of English. So if you are thinking about English, you might misunderstand what I'm saying. But today, even today, if you're a woman in this group and you go to your own household, you will see that the women that were married to your household will regard you as a husband. And they, unlike the Igbo culture, where they have clear dual system, independent women, Yoruba don't have that. I think some people always say we do. No, if we have it, I think it's more concept that's more common nowadays. It's not concept that is really predominant. It exists, but it's not something that dominates Yoruba, because Yoruba always want this feminine and masculine power combined together, integrated. I think that's how when you look at the monarch's crown, for example, you see birds and many other things that represent yak. Even though the palace is supposed to be dominated by a male figure, but there must be this power. When you look at the market, mostly dominated by women. But that doesn't mean that men don't exist in the market. Of course, men go to market, but they prefer women to dominate it. So there is the body that dominates something and the concept of integration. That's how the Yoruba think. So please, this duality is a little bit, and it will be problematic even now, because today we'll be thinking that, oh, a man doesn't have to become Yoruba president. We just need, a woman doesn't have to become. She just becomes a woman leader, and the man will be becoming. So we need to be careful when we are thinking about this concept. Yoruba don't think that way. They give the position to who it is due. So, yeah, I think I'm trying to be as brief as possible. So let me just stop here so that other people can also bring something else. Maybe we'll come back to that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was really good. That was really good. In fact, we need to talk some more. I'm sorry, somebody tried to call me. And the book for Oyoroke was the Invention of Women. The Invention of Women. That book title itself is provocative, and you guys should read it when you have some time. And Oyoroke was she was a princess of Ogbomoso. I think she died, if I'm correct on that.
No.
Was she the one that died?
No, I think it's her father that died.
Her father died, but there was his daughter of Shawun that died before Shawun died.
Okay. I don't think she's the one.
Oh yeah, maybe she's not. Yeah.
Well.
Okay. But anyway, so that's the title of the book if you want to read it. The Invention of Women, she called it. I'm going to let Mr. Bunker speak. Then we will.
Sorry, Obina Koshe. Maybe before Bunker speak, I know Bunker will have a lot to say.
Okay.
I just want to briefly say something. Maybe I know Bunker will be able to speak along that extensively. I'm in the office.
Okay.
I have to
Can you guys hear us on Twitter?
Yes, we can.
Okay, go on, sir.
All right, so I have to shut down something to be able to do this. When you look at these British people that came to colonize and, how to contend with some of our women, which you have rightly mentioned, I look at some of their history and I think anybody that have lived in UK for quite a long time or recently, read some of the book of their history, you realize that at a particular time in the 18th century, whatever woman does, whatever business they do, they give the money to the men. And I'm trying to look at the history of Yoruba. Never in the history of Yoruba our women from the beginning, how to do business and how to give the money to the men or whatever. So I'm trying to look at the history of our women in the 17th century, 18th century, that these are powerful women that are more powerful than even the British women, because British women are not as powerful as our women. When they came, they had to contend with them. For instance, it was in 1918 down to 1928 that women up to the age of 30 years, from the age of 30 years, had the voting right. No, 1928, they had a voting equal right with men. As an 18th century, late 18th century, they were struggling to be able to say, give us opportunity to vote. You know, at that time, women don't even have say, by my own understanding. And I think the likes of Bunka will have more history, you know, knowledge on this. I'm just trying to compare this so-called British. I'm not trying to underrate them. I'm not trying to belittle them. I know they are also powerful women, but I'm trying to look at our own women right from, you know, that age. When you talk about the likes of Madame Efori Tinubu, you know, Pelewura and all those stuff, these are women that stand even, you know, stronger than men in those days. And so how come they came and made our women stronger, not to talk of our men? You know, I'm just trying to compare this, you know, to, based on the little history I know about the rights women began to have in the 1900 to 1918, 28 in UK, and what our women have had even in the 18th century in Nigeria, in the Yoruba land. These are women that goes to war. These are women that fought war in those days. These are women that command a whole, you know, town in those days. And so I don't know. I know the likes of Bunker and Co will be able to substantiate more on that. I just want us to appreciate the fact that these things are not just history. Olodumare made Yoruba land a unique land. I won't shy away from the fact that when this, I don't want to talk about religion because I know it's always very controversial. You know, when we started reading some others that say the men are the head and all those stuff, these are the history that actually rubbishes our women and all those stuff. From the beginning, our women are stronger and powerful than any region. I know Bunka will be able to say better on this. Thank you. Let me stop here.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Bunka, you can go for the next 15 minutes. That's okay.
Okay, 15 minutes. I'll try
You
to
think
keep in time.
15 to 20, maybe 20 minutes?
Okay, not a problem.
Okay.
And first of all, before we, for us to understand where the position of a woman is in the Yoruba culture, you have to look at a woman not from the view of a gender. You have to look at it first and foremost from the view of an energy. You see, what makes me a man? What makes you a woman? It's something that predates this world. We only come in this body and then we come in this shape. But all the energies, all the components that now ends up making you a man or making me a woman, it predates when our parents met each other and did what they did to conceive us. So this is where we, as Yoruba people, and if you know, in our culture, in our pantheons, Yoruba is always spiritual. Whatever we do, we always look at it from a spiritual angle. Before marriage, when a child is born, the things that will happen during marriage, even music, for you to be a musician, there are spiritual things to it. There are people dedicated for certain things. That's why we have the Anyo. Anybody that has the Anyo prefix, your descendants, your ancestors, were into music and they were dedicated for that. They went through all the spiritual rites and all that to do that. Now, you see the energy that transforms into the female gender. First of all, I want us to know that it represents justice. So you see, the person that spoke before me was talking about religion. Abrahamic religions, there's something they did. They looked at all the things that belongs to a woman and placed it under a man. So in most Abrahamic religions and in most cultures, they were influenced by it. From the time of the birth of a woman to her death, she's under the authority of a man, one way or the other. If it's not her father, it's gonna be her husband, it's gonna be her brother, or the eldest male in the family, or the eldest chief in the clan. So that's how it has always been designed. A woman was not created to ever be independent in our thoughts, in our decisions, in our actions, in our right to own properties. When you look at the foreign religions that came. So, but you see, they still tap into those powers and energies that belong to those women to become what they are. So it's like it's the same thing that happened in slavery, where you look at the black man as much, much more superior to you in many ways. And rather than ever allow the black man to ever be successful, you take whatever belongs to the black man and use it to advance your own society. So it started with slavery, and then it started to take, you see, most of the innovations that emerged in Africa, in America, from telephone to electricity to auto to cars, they were all created by, many of them were invented by men, by black people, but the patents and the benefits, the royalties, it ended up ending up with the white people. Same thing with what you call the Tulsa massacre, when the black people created the first Wall Street in a place called Oklahoma, and it was removed. Now you see, if you look at almost every culture that understands spirituality, you will understand that anything that represents justice is usually a feminine energy. There was Pachamama, that was in the Aztecs and South American regions, and then there was Mat. Mat is the woman in Egypt. So when you die in Egypt, your heart is placed on the scale. You see, so if you look at justice, and you see those scales that they put on justice and stuff like that, that all started from Egypt. They originated from Egypt, and so they put your heart on one part of the scale. They put a feather on the other. So Mat is the woman that represents justice. So that's why you will see that the Statue of Liberty is a woman. The Statue of Liberty is they call it Lady Liberty. It came from a man called Bartholdi, a French sculptor, and he was greatly influenced by Egyptian spirituality. So, and then if you look at in our own Yoruba pantheons, you will see that what represents justice is also feminine energy. They call them the Yami. I mean, they've given bad connotations to these things, but they used to call them the Yami Aje. Yami Oshurunga, and Aje is not a bad word. I like the way it sounds when you first hear it. So those were the people that represent justice in those days. Those were the people who, Orunmila, when he wants to make atonement, appeasement,
we can't hear
involved in the creation of the world with Eledumare. Is someone trying to talk?
We miss you. We lose you just a little bit, but you're fine now.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. So now you will see that the feminine energy also represents order in the spiritual world. So if you want a nation, a society to have order, you need to greatly have the influence of a woman. Now, there's going to be an interesting paradox I'm going to put into it. This, look at almost all the great and romantic empires you've known. You'll be shocked to know that they were actually created by a woman, not a man. They were greatly influenced. My mom, when we were young, my mom was close to my elder brother, and my dad was really close to me. So my mom used to joke that, remember the story of Jacob? You remember that Jacob loved Esau, and his wife loved Jacob loved Isaac, and the wife loved Jacob, who ended up becoming great. So they used to joke about that, but I mean, those things resonate with me as I grow older. Like, yes, when you have the support of a woman, and if you look at all these great men that you see in Nigeria, from Mike Adenuga to even Dangote, you'll be shocked to see the influence of their mothers, from female figures in their life, including even the sage Obafemi Awolowo. If he ever gets to talk about the role his wife played in his life, so that he could become great, we would all be shocked. You know. Now, if you look at the origin of the Egyptian greatness, it started with a woman called Hatshepsut, Queen Hatshepsut. She's the half sister of Ramses. Ramses was the one who now would eventually kind of take Upper and Lower Egypt. If you look at the Nubian, the greatness of the Nubian started with the Candace kings, Candace queens. Among them is a woman called Amenishako. And she was one of the, and then there was another Candace Queen who actually stood up to Augustus Caesar. Another one stood up to Alexander in the good old days. And they were very powerful, great warriors that used elephants to fight. The origin of the greatest empire that we know in human history is the British Empire. That's the only empire where they said the sun does not set on it. The greatest influence on the British empires were women, not men. Queen Victoria, who they actually have an age. There's an age in England where they say the Victorian age. That's how much she was remembered, because there was a lot of revolutions that happened in that time. And that was the time when the British Empire started. And the person who actually expanded it to the greatest heights was the current queen on the throne now, Queen Elizabeth. Even though the empire kind of disbanded at that time because of the New World Order of that time, she is still the one behind the Commonwealth and all the greatness that you see behind it today. Now, in our times, in the Yoruba region, a lot of revolutions started happening in the 15 and 1600s. And I'm talking of the Lower Niger period. That was because three great women emerged in that area. And I'm going to talk of them fast. I don't know how I'm going to kind of rush all this in 20 minutes, but I'll see how I can do it.
You're fine. Keep going.
Okay, all right. So the first, you see, the evolution that transformed the southern lower part of what you call Nigeria today into greatness started with the emergence of some three very powerful women from the moment of the 1500s up all the way to the 1600s. The number one happened on the Hausa lands, and her name was Queen Amina. So she emerged at a time when the Shongai was conquering the Shongai Empire was trying to take over all the River Niger basin. So you started from Guinea and they conquered all the way till they got to Hausa land. So they took most of the Hausa states. They took Kano. They took Sokoto, which that time it used to be called Gobert. They took Katsina. Although Shongai Empire became a blessing in disguise, because it was from the Shongai Empire that the Hausa civilization emerged. That was when they started to have their caravan trade routes, and they started to have their merchant cities. One was in Kano, and one of the markets that was built in Kano during the Shongai Empire is called the Kumi market. It still exists in Kano today. It was built by a Sakin, a Hausa king known as Muhammad Rumfa, and there was another one built at Katsina, and there was another one built at Gobert. But when Queen Amina emerged, Queen Amina fought and resisted the Shongai Empire, and then built the first Hausa Empire, which was at Zaria. They called it Zazu then. Built now her own independent caravan trade routes, but she didn't take it all the way to the northern, to the Ottoman. She took it to the Sudan region. So she started the first big commercial markets and connections with the Yoruba interiors when she started to get kola nuts, where her major wealth came from kola nut trades. Now, another woman emerged around that time, and that woman emerged at Oyo, and her name was Orompoto. I always struggle to call the name right. I've been corrected many times. Yeah, but now you see this woman also emerged around the same time that Queen Amina emerged. And she was the woman that actually gave Oyo the pride that it has been struggling to have since the days of Shango. She was the first person to defeat the Bariba people. She was the first person to defeat the Nupe people. The Nupe people have been very aggressive to Oyo. They've chased them into exiles. They've attacked them many times. When they came back again, the Nupe people, it was a lifelong hatred for them. It had something to do with Shango. You remember that Shango was very famous in Nupe Kingdom, and he came from there to rule Oyo. And the end of Shango was not good, and Nupe people blamed Oyo for what happens to Shango, and that has caused a lot of bad blood between them for many years. This woman was the first to build the Calvary Mite of Oyo, she built the horse Calvary. And that horse Calvary was what gave Oyo its majestic imperial feel. So because in the heightens of Oyo's glory, these horses would march through the whole empire, and it took them 6 months. They will march all the way to Dahomey. They will march all the way to Porto Novo. Then from there they will march to the Egba lands and the Egbado regions. Those were all under Oyo. And then from there they will march to the to do that. And they always kind of give a majestic feel, give a great connection to Oyo. And unfortunately, one of the kings that stopped this was Malafin Abiodun, and that was one of the things that led to the fall of Oyo eventually, because people didn't feel the presence of that capital anymore. But the foundation of what eventually became Oyo Empire, the foundation of what became Oyo glory, the military might, all started with a woman called Orompoto. Then the third woman was she married at a place called Benin, and her name was Queen Ida. Most of you that have watched the first act and you watch NTA, the mask that used to be shown then, that was the face of Ida. Ida was the mother of Moba Esige, and she was the one who made sure that Esige emerged on the throne as king. Even though he had an elder brother, and she was a warrior woman. She used to kind of lead wars at that time. And she was the one that consolidated her son and helped her son to expand Benin into a very big, powerful, magnificent empire. And it was Esige's grandson, Oba Urugwa, that would eventually conquer the coastal regions. It was Urugwa that was on the throne when Benin eventually became the patrons of Lagos, for instance. So they were the ones. So that started from that. From her, and you can see, so those three women, they all emerged around the same time, and they changed the socio-political environment of that region, and they brought prosperity that lasted for many years. You know, now a lot of women played very great roles in Oyo in those days. But I'm going to skip that so that I don't kind of hold the mic a lot. If I get to come back, I could talk about that. But by the time the British, I want to also let us know that a feminine energy represents wealth. So Orishaje, although I used to struggle with this, I used to fight this with the Ishashe people, but Orishaje is actually a feminine energy. That's what I saw in my study. And when I looked at the wealth that came from the seas, when I looked at the orishas of wealth in the Greek culture, in the Phoenician culture, in the Egyptian culture, it's usually feminine energy. So these are not some things that are just unique to Yoruba culture alone. It's across. Now, when the British came, in the British culture, because the foundation of their culture was Christianity, and Christianity said there was God, and then there was man, and then there was woman. That's the hierarchy. That wasn't our own kind of style of doing it then. So they said that a man represents God on earth, and power should be consolidated to a man. And so the centralization of everything must come from the king. Now, the woman used to be independent of men, right? So, though whatever happens in the women court, they used to take it to the Yalo Day and the Yalo Jazz, so men didn't get involved in whatever happened to a woman. Men didn't get involved in the commercial practices in terms of the markets and things like that. Those were exclusively women. So when the British came, they didn't like that. So one of the things they did was that they started to corrode that culture, and they greatly destroyed the position of Iyalode. One of the places where the first started that was in Lagos. If you notice it, the dynasty of Lagos, the royal house of Lagos actually started from a woman. I think they call her Erelu Kuti. If I'm correct, I'm not, but I know she's an Erelu, but I don't. So you see, that's the way that she came from. And as a time that the British arrived in Lagos, for Lagos, the wealthiest Lagos, one woman and her name was Omeforo Tinubu. Now, Tinubu was the financier of the bank. So he needed Tinubu, and so that's the one that was system. So the system was the bank system of that time. You come and go practice collateral. That was what Madam Tinubu was doing at that time, and so people used to give her children, their children, family members as collateral, which was allowed at that time, right? So now she was also the biggest landowner in Lagos at that time. You see, all the land that was called Marina, that used to be her land. Igbobi College, that was her land. You know, so that's why they call it Igbobi College means Igbobi. That was a kola nut farm. So she had a big, massive estate at Butemeta. Now, when the British came, she was very conservative and she was really, really fighting them. So one of the things they had to do first was to destroy the offer system, to destroy her financial base. Then they started a new credit system, and then they brought in a group of Africans from Sierra Leone that we call the Saros. They brought them into Lagos, and they now used that to disrupt her commodity influence in Lagos. She was the sole seller of kola nut. She was the sole seller of cotton, and this was around the time when there was civil war going on in America. So she was one of the major suppliers of cotton to Europe. She was one of the sole suppliers of palm oil, which was a very important commodity at that time when they were coming. In fact, the foundation of the Industrial Revolution in Europe was built on palm oil. And that's another whole story, but I'm trying to just kind of cut things as fast as possible. Now, so she was the one controlling all this trade. So when the British came, they frustrated her out of this system, took away her wealth base and distributed it among the Saros. And that was when people like Darocha, people like a lot of the Saros now started becoming very rich in Lagos. I don't remember their names off my head, but that was where their wealth. So even up till now, you see the Saros, those are descendants of Saros, still very influential in Lagos life up till today, including that man that just died recently, that was very, very wealthy, one of the big permanent members of the United Nations, you know. And they all came from Brazil at that time. So she had to rush to Egbaland. They had to chase her out of Lagos so that they can do that. Now, when they got Nigeria, one of the things they did was destroy the influence of women in socio-political events. And then they consolidated the powers to the kings so that they can use that to greatly exploit, because the wealth in Yoruba land was handled by women, and they wanted access to that wealth. And they knew that if they are going to do that, they have to kind of take away that wealth away from them. So they destroyed the Yaloja title. They destroyed everything that influenced the women in the courts. This was what led to all the violence that were starting. There were 3 women revolts that started in southern Nigeria at that time. One was at Apa, and then 2 happened in our own region, Yoruba land. The first one happened at Egba. They thought that they were going to take advantage of these women because they were illiterate, right? Now, a woman emerged at that time, and her name was Madam Kuti. Madam Kuti now started, in fact, she was an educated woman. She used to rule with all the British and all that. Now, this was happening even while the Europeans have not even started feminism. I'm talking of things that were happening in the early 1900s, and feminism started in the 1940s. So you see that Africans were already resisting oppression of men long before the European counterparts even caught wind of it. So you see, she now started to bring these women together, and she brought in her sons and her nephew. Her nephew was Wole Soyinka, and her son was the musician. I'm growing old. Names are just skipping my head. Fela Kuti and Olukoye Ransom Kuti. They started to become teachers for these market women. You know? So, in fact, because of this, 2 great legends emerged from this place. One of them was Fela Kuti. Fela Kuti loved music and saw music as a weapon because of what he saw his mother and this woman do with music at that time. From Wale Soyinka became an English professor because he taught English to this woman, and he saw the power of knowledge, the power of exposure, the power of good, effective communication. So you can see that two great legends emerged from Madame Kuti's revolt at that time. And this woman blocked the entrance to the king's palace, blocked and holds the whole Egba land on a standstill. And Egba land was very, very important to England at that time because it was shortly after World War II. England was broke, and most of the commodities that they were using to run their country was coming from this region. So you know what they did? They decided to bring in the Oro festival. You know, they told the king to invoke the Oro. And one of these things was that Oro was something women was not supposed to see. And these women have already kind of taken over the streets, and they stopped paying everybody from business had halted. Taxes were not coming as usual again. There was a white man that came there. I've forgotten his name, and he was attacking Madame Tinubu right in front of all the other women and telling them, like, you are women, you are not supposed to be arrogant like this. You cannot confront men like that. And you know what Madame Kuti did? She grabbed this white man, pulled him into their midst, and said that they should castrate him and send his manhood back to his parents in England for disrespecting African women. God saved him that the palace guards were around to have stopped him. He would have been castrated right there and then. So, but now, when the Oro festival started, and all the men now started coming to that grounds, to the king's courts and the grounds to grab their wives, this Madame Kuti marched into those houses and got those women out one by one, grabbed their husbands, put them on the ground, and put sand on them, and said, any one of you that comes to these grounds to pick any woman, will tell me. When Yoro eventually came out, Madame Kuti walked up to these guys, grabbed the Yoro mask from them, and smashed it on the man's head and said, listen, you can't scare me with that. That was how brave she was. And you can see the great influence that happened on her son, the way her son stood his ground on a lot of things. And you can see how the guy became totally messed up after his mom was killed. Those who went to that house and targeted his mom knew what they were doing. They knew that that was the source of his strength. So this was the influence. And guess how this ended? That man, that king, nearly died of a stroke. He had to abdicate the throne. He had to run to exile to the Middle Belt for a long time. So that was how powerful these women were at that time. So you see, this is where I want to end. Because I don't want to hold the mic too much, but I want us to know that the greatest of the Yoruba women came mostly from that Egba region. And so if you see that all the great women that Madame Tinubu was the warlord who stopped the invasion of Gezo when he was coming in from Dahomey. He already sacked all the Egba Kingdom regions, took all those guys, all the people there into slavery. When he got into Abeokuta, Madame Tinubu financed the war. Her private militia was the ones that stopped him from invading Abeokuta. The wars that were being fought during Arelatosa's time in Ibadan, where he went into the Edo, the Ekiti regions to fight Fabumi, the wars that he fought, the Jalumi War, all those were being financed by also an Egba woman, and her name was Efushiton Aniwura. She was one of the most powerful women at Ibadan at that time. And you see, the richest black woman on planet Earth today is also an Egba woman, and she owns an oil company. I think it's Fanfa Oil, and her name skipped my head. I'm sure you people know who I'm talking about. So you see, Alakija. Thank you, ma. Let me land with this. Now, in Lagos, they thought they had already taken away the powers of the women, and a local fish seller emerged. Her name was Alima Tokpelewura. She also led a group of women, and they blocked the streets. They blocked the house. They marched into Bordelon Road in Ikoyi at that time, and held the king the governor general at that time hosted, and the governor general at that time was Clifford. He wrote the Clifford Constitution in the 1920s. For a long time, Lagos could not function well until they had to reverse all these things and reverse all the tax. She was a powerful mobilizer. She was the brain behind the foundation of the first indigenous national party in Nigeria, NNDP, founded by Herbert Macaulay. That was the woman that gave him the mobilizations. That was the woman that gave him the populations and all the victories. So they had an arrangement. Alimoto Belewura, being an illiterate, worked with Herbert Macaulay to provide him with accountants and lawyers and all that. She in turn now provided him with the mobilizations he needed, and he always won all those political parties all the time that she was around. So these were the powers of this woman at that time. This was the greatest of these women, and we look forward to a time when they will be given that kind of respect. They stood their ground and fought at a time when men could not even stand up to their fellow white men. So kudos. That's what I have to say. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That was well done. That was well done. It leads me right into where I wanted to go next with the discussion. And the one thing that I wanted to say, which you just said, was that these women, they didn't capitulate even when the politics were bitter. These women, in Ake Ogunjoron's book, he described them as Obìnrin bí ọkùnrin, which is what Yoruba would say Obìnrin bí ọkùnrin. So you also have to know that it is not all Yoruba women that was like that. It's just that there is a significant percentage of Yoruba women that were like that. And also the dynamics of the relationship between Yoruba men and women in those days is not what it is today anymore. So I'm going to go on, and the next, if you have a question in Clubhouse, you can type it. I'm going to see if I can answer some of those questions here. So I'm going to go next to talk about the colonial rule. And this is where things started to go down south. And some of the problem that happened that time was the Western education. The Western education was discriminatory against Yoruba women. The Yoruba women didn't really have access to this education compared to the men, because some of the perception was that females, they're going to go to their husband, and then it's because the education actually was expensive. The parents, the people have to pay for it, believe it or not. It was not free. Like people want us to make us believe that the missionaries were just giving you this free education. That's not true, actually. They had to pay for it. So it was thought of as a waste of money because the women were going to be married and things like that. So a lot of girls, a lot of female were disadvantaged at that time. Also, but there is also there's also something a little bit interesting, because for the missionaries, from some sources that I looked at, it took them actually maybe 100 years actually before they could actually break through to us in terms of this missionary education that they brought to us. And it was through the females that were abused that they were able to gain inroads. So some of their very first converts were female slaves, abused wives, women that were forced into marriages. These were the people that were first taken in. So if you don't treat your women right, you make them to be your Achilles heel. They are some of the roads in which the missionary came in, even though when people start to become more receptive of this European education, it tends not to be something that was given to women. But look at the church today, anywhere in the world. Who do you see there when you go there? I think 80% are women. So if you want to reclaim something back, you know where to go. You know who you're supposed to go talk to if you want to gain something back. Also, the women organizations were used as tools. Like the organization skills of Yoruba women was also utilized by the church. Actually, at that time, United Missionary College, the UMC, they used the system of Egbe in Yoruba land to actually put their church in order. So they talk about the fact that women used to have Egbe in Yoruba, you know, Egbe Agba, Egbe Omode, Egbe Abileko, stuff like that. So they use the same concept to create some organization in the church, and they use it to distribute them by ages and all that. Then we talk about some of the things that happened the time when things start to get bad. Was the marriage was another issue. So the British brought in their British common law, and they essentially brought their marriage ordinance that, you know, they enforced monogamy. So when they did this, it changed the dynamics of women roles. So some women, they were more insisting of monogamy because some of them don't want polygamy. And when they start to do that, it's described that they become more dependent on their men. Remember, part of the thing that happened in a polygyny was the fact that the families are big. There's so many wives, so many children. Labor was cheap. These women could literally afford. Yoruba women, I used to still hear from my grandmothers when I was growing up, how their mothers will travel for months and months in those days, selling clothes, you know. So the women were not, their mind don't choke on that. And I think part of it was because it was mostly polygyny family, polygamous relationship, that there are other women there. There's no point tying your woman down. But with monogamy, everything changes. These women now, they become more dependent on their husband too, because there's more, they become more of a homemaker, the way they describe women. Also, the marriage, another thing that's interesting that I found out was that the monogamous marriage that was enforced by the British, they also outlaw some other things as well. There were laws that make it easier for women to divorce. Divorce was not easy in Yoruba land. Remember that in our culture, it's almost like a negative thing actually to be divorced. Though I usually think that it may not necessarily be true, but some of the sources said that divorce was easier. There was more access to divorce that time. You don't need to go through all the families to divorce. You can just go to the court and get a paper and you divorce. So also they forbidden women to women marriage. Apparently there were women to women marriages in Bunu. There's a place called Bunu in northeastern part. I think I talked to her, he said somewhere in Kwara. So they have these women to women marriages there. It was outlawed. So all of these things was how the women role, their strength, so to say, starts to decline. In fact, the divorce rate in Ibadan was said to be so high between 1939 to 1947 that it rose from 7,000 to 12,000. Then there was a complete society value breakdowns. The women abandoned their typical roles and all of that. And this just continued like that. Then the unequal access to education, of course, that also continued. So that created the whites, even till today. I live in the United States of America. The white men are extremely patriarchal. If you think a Yoruba man is a patriarch, you have really not dealt with some crazy white men. You see what Bonka was describing, how a white man actually confronted Madame Kuti and said, what kind of a woman are you? You shouldn't be talking to men like this. Women are not supposed to talk like this. I personally have experienced that position before, whereby a white man think, you should not be talking to, are you a woman? You shouldn't be talking to me like that. So it's in their DNA to be able to conquer and control everything that is in their environment. And they brought the same kind of mannerism and used it to corrupt our own values that essentially was good. And just keep in mind, men and women relationship in Yoruba land was not an equality kind of thing. It's just a balance. There was a good balance between them. Men are still ahead of women. They're still, you still regarded them as the head. It's still there, but it's not the way it is right now, where it looks like a subjugated relationship compared to the men. Also, the Western education, the curriculum was such that they created this home studies kind of thing. Some people still took it in college. They call them home economics. Women, when they started to create that, actually, that's when they now allow more women to come into the West, to the European education, because they can just, train them. It's more of, you learn to cook, you learn to do chores, you learn to sew clothes and things like that. And something sinister that was going on. You mentioned how, how they changed how they brought in competitive trade, which ruined the market force of the women, because what they did that time was that what the British did that time was they brought in all these sorrows, they created competition for the local trade. All of these has an effect. Part of the effect was the fact that, remember I mentioned earlier, like in Abeokuta, for example, half of the city was Alaro, the people that were making tie and dye clothes that for exports. They have their big ports and everything there. By the time they brought in foreign markets, importation of other clothing, they ruined the market. This greatly affects the women. So a lot of them, they lost their means of, livelihood, that thing that gave them that strength, which was the trade, the market. They were losing grip on it. Of course, the market is still dominated by women, but there were a lot of women that became pretty much jobless, and also they lost a lot of those skills started to go away. Then they now replace it. They replace it with home economics for them in the school. They replace it with teaching them how to sew clothes using the machine of the whites. So all the skills that we had before, that we were using before, they were gradually replaced. So all of this also contributed to how women became degraded. Also, the mission schools, contrary to the mission school, also they said that the mission school actually prefer to educate the ladies, to educate girls, because they find them to be more useful to mission, like I mentioned before. Well, if you convert a woman, you're most likely going to convert everybody in that family, because at the end of the day, a good woman will know how to feed her husband. She definitely is going to take all the kids along with her. So all of these cultivated into how things were handled. And believe it or not, despite the fact that the Europeans have been in a land, the missionaries have been in a land for, I don't remember how many years they were there for, but at least by 1950, by 1950, they've been there for almost 100 years, the missions. They had just 29 schools and about 50,000 students, despite being there for 100 years. I particularly want to emphasize that, because when we talk about change, we are so much in a hurry. We want Yoruba nation now, we want it today. It doesn't happen that way. Things take time. They spend 100 years to try to preach mission, because the mission is not really about Christ. Christ is not the problem. They are just using it as a weapon of, enslavement and a weapon of colonization. But they only had 50,000 students after being there for 100 years, and they had just 29 schools. And guess what? It's not until the free education of Obafemi Awolowo in 1957 that the missionary education now actually had success. So it actually take us to spread this thing, because when Chief Awolowo wanted to bring the schools, the first free education thing was for about 400,000 students. He used the missionaries, they used their curriculum, and I think he gave them money actually to build more schools. This was how he was able to create that fantastic education system. I just wished that time they had made it more Yoruba-centric than Eurocentric. Perhaps it would have even served us better today. So also the market changes. So when you look at it, so they talk about when all this market changes, the women, the Yoruba women are so creative, they're so industrious. When you take something, they will invent another thing. When you take something, they invent another thing. So when they took all the, the clothing and everything that they used to make, it came down. Then you have all these women in the Jebu area, they come up with all this gari Jebu. They started manufacturing all this gari and everything. So they find a way, these women find a way to keep themselves relevant. Even though at that time, during the colonial era, the power of women has really, really, really depreciated. There wasn't really strong women like Tinubu, Efusheton, all those Obasa women. They were not really present that I know of. Then came the time of around when, during the time when we're very close to independence, close to, that's when we have the rise of people like Alimot Belewura that Donka just mentioned, the market woman leader. They joined forces. And interesting thing was another beautiful way in which Yoruba women will reinvent themselves is that even at that time, when the Yoruba men were involved in the politics, doing all this, their action group and NNDP, whatever, they were mostly like men dominated. It looks like the women were not really part of it, because maybe that's how they learned the politics from the West, which we're trying to copy. But the women, something else totally was going on with them. That was this women movement that was going on. So the Kwelewura movement, the Funmilayo Kuti's movement that led to the abdication of the Alake Ademola II in 1946. All of these women, after they have fought their war that time and won, that's when our men now came to them. That's when our men now came to them. And actually, when the book that I read said that the women were co-opted into those political organizations. So they co-opt them into the action group, the likes of Fumikuti was co-opted into that. And the women now brought the mobilization.
So, Koshe,
yeah.
Sorry to cut it, just to help you with that in that area.
Yes.
You see what happened in Egbaland? Mm-hmm. When Awolowo came there and wanted to join that politics, Madam Kuti did not support him because she was an NCNC. So Awolowo now brought back Alake to be Oba on the condition that they will help to restrict Madam Kuti, because anywhere she went at that time, the whole crowd went. So that was how they were able to corner it. And all the women were actually actively involved in politics. In fact, that was what caused the problem between Mama Itaji Awolowo and Akintola, because after Awolowo left, Akintola was saying that she should be the leader of the market women. At that time, they had a big society at Dubai. And Madam Awolowo said no, that she's still going to be the leader. That was what caused the tension at that time. Mm-hmm. And lastly, because most of them were illiterates at that time, of the Lagos faction, that was what the Albert Macaulay used to his advantage. He was like, I will provide you accounting services, lawyer services, journalist services. In exchange, you will support me for mobilization. Sorry, I just thought to add that.
Yeah, that was interesting. Thanks. That's interesting. So, but anyway, you can see, just like he was trying to say, that there was an equal political distribution going on there. And you can still see how the women came through, because the majority of their movement brought in the much more needed group, the mobilization that was needed to make the politics of the time to be successful. And they describe the political groups of Oyinka Abayomi, Fumi Kuti. They have this Lagos Women Party and Abeokuta Women's Group. They describe them as militant. They were described to be militant compared to maybe even the likes of Pelewura wasn't described to be militant, but I think they were militant if you think about the things that they did. And another thing is that these women were so, the likes of Kuti, they were for her to step down from a pedestal, somebody that you would consider her to be an aristocrat, and she could relate, she could speak the language of the market women. This is how versatile a Yoruba woman is. If you cannot, talk to the person that you might consider not to be equal to your social status and all of that, you won't really be able to be an Iyalode, would you? You won't be, because you're supposed to represent everybody. So these women were able to do that. There were also other societies in other parts of Yoruba land that time. They have the Binu Konu and the Maji Agbe societies in Ibadan that were formed in the late 50s. There were several women that were very, very active that time. Remember, this was a resurgence of the women back into the political arena. So we have the life of Fumi Kuti, Umani Alaga, she's from Ibadan. So remember when I said that when the British they pretty much destroyed the trade of the women. They destroyed the market and everything. They brought in competitions. They destroyed the economic power of the Yoruba women. But you see, the life of Umani Alaga, she is one of those women that was able to break through that barrier. So if you're used to Ibadan very well, there's a place called Lebanon Street in Ibadan where the Lebanese, pretty much came, and they were selling all these their fabrics there. Umani Alaga was the person that was the first Yoruba woman to break into that market and actually broke their monopoly. So she was also very, very rich, and I think she also became Iyalode Ibadan, if I remember correctly. So we have the likes of Wura Olaisan, Umani Alade, Elizabeth Adekogbe, Tanimo Ogunlesi, Elsie Femi Pierce, Kizia Fashino. There was a woman in Ibadan at the time. Actually, she was the woman leader, or maybe the Yaibe or whatever, of the Ibadan party. This was Alaja Asmau Odonla Alabi. She was the great grandmother of Babaleka Alabi, and he always talked about what she did, her role in merging the party. Because remember, during that time of the NCNC saga with Awolowo, Adelabo, all these things going on that time. Remember, they accused Ibadan of crossing the carpet and everything. This woman was pivotal in how they were able to convince that party at that time to form an alliance with the Action Group that allowed Chief Awolowo to come through. Though she was later, so their party at that time was called Ibadan. There was a particular name for their party that time. Though later on she will go with Adelabu, Adegoke, Penkelemes, but just so you know, in every sector of Yoruba
the party was Ibadan People's Party.
Ibadan People's Party, exactly. That was the original party, and she was the Yaibe of that party. And they did that. They crossed the carpet to join the AG and gave Awolowo the victory. Otherwise, we would have been ruled by Zik that time. So you can never. But you see, despite everything that the women did after the victory of the election, they didn't really give them much position, even within the Action Group that time. They didn't really rewarded them as they should. When they went for the talk about the constitution in Britain, I think there were 2 women or 3 women that went with them. Fumi Kuti was with them. There was 2 other women. I have their name. When I get to that point, maybe I'll mention, because we need to know the name of these women very well. It's not just Fumilayo Kuti anyway. It's what I wanted to correct. She was not the only one that was in that meeting. There were also other women that were there. And so I talk about their resurgence during the colonial stroke post-colonial period. And I mentioned a lot of the women that were active participants in that. And some of them, perhaps the one that had the most success at the time was Wura Olaisan. She was the first female senator in 1960 of the Action Group. So Fumi Kuti, Ogunlesi, and Esan, those 3 women attended the talk with the Britain prior to independence. And Remi Ayedun and Abayomi, those 2 women, they sat in the Western House. Only 1 woman was made senator in 1960. There's one thing I wanted to point out. These women, religion did not divide them. social class did not divide them. They were able to maintain the thing that they needed to do, despite their differences in their social status at that time. And the story continues. The story continues. A lot of and during the time of the military, okay. So I'm going to mention briefly some of the challenges that the women faced during all this time when they were doing politics. We have people, they removed. We have people try to reduce them to sexual objects or birther of children. That their role is not so, that they're not normal, that their role is supposed to be in the kitchen. They were denied access to Western education. Also, even when they got Western education that time, they couldn't get jobs actually. Despite the fact that they had equivalent Western education to their male counterpart, there was no job for them. And also, there was something that they did that time that is still very active today, and that is to mute these women in the political arena. Like, oh, don't talk. You should not talk. Just don't talk. Just leave them alone. Just pass. So it's called mutism. So they did that to them, and it's still going on till today. You're not supposed to talk like this, or that's not ladylike kind of thing. A woman should not be talking like that in public. And all of these were newer things that I think came with colonialism. And also the religion, both Islam and Christianity, the perception of the role of women is that of a support or maybe a weaker vessel. Or the women in Islam, you're not supposed to be, it's funny because you see some people that say they are Muslims and all of that, Muslim women, they're talking now on the television. That's why you question if they really interpret the religion the way it should be. You're supposed to lower your gaze when you're talking to a male. You shouldn't raise your voice. You probably shouldn't even speak publicly. So when you factor all this into it, it also leads to how the power of the women, the strength of the Yoruba women became corrupted, it became diluted. And also there is a stigma. If you're a woman in the political arena, you're considered to be useless, actually, you're considered to be a slut, you're considered to be loose. There's just this negative thing that is attached to your participation that make it such that it is impossible for you as a woman to participate. Also, the political environment is such that it's been hijacked by people who are able to muzzle things like thuggery and violence. They bring in a lot of hostile policies. The political parties, they created positions in the parties that are mostly created for men. So you as a woman, you're going to be intimidated into so you won't be able to participate. So these are ways in which Yoruba we continue to sabotage ourselves, because everything that we're doing is not incongruent with our culture. The days when we were successful were the days when we considered the voices of our women to be important, and we respected it, and we gave them critical roles in our society. And if you look today, look at all the Southwestern governors, there's no woman there. I don't even think any one of them has a deputy that's a woman. They're very, very hostile, very, very hostile. So we need to do better. And, then we move on to the military time. The women, they didn't slow down. So they gained a little bit during the time of Awolowo. Not much, actually, I have to say, considering the work that they did. But look at even democracy in Nigeria. Yoruba women bears the brunt of it. During the annulment of the 1993 election, Chief MKO Abiola, his wife, Kudrat Abiola, she paid the ultimate price because she was fighting for the return of democracy. It's not just about her husband, it's about fighting for what was right. Suliat Adedeji, Elijah Suliat Adedeji, she was an entrepreneur in Ibadan. She was one of those people that was assassinated by Abacha squad because she was speaking up for democracy. She wasn't related to MKO Abiola. She was just fighting for what was right, and she was a Yoruba woman. Both of them, they paid the ultimate price for the democracy that they are enjoying today in Nigeria. And the Nadeko OPC movement, actually, the Fourth Republic, the introduction of democracy, like I was saying, so many women were also involved in this. I didn't even know this until I was looking into literature that the Oduduwa People's Congress, that movement, that powerful Yoruba movement, many times in movements, had a lot of women, a lot of Yoruba women was behind the success of that movement. The Nadeko movement, a lot of Yoruba women were there. I'm going to mention some of their names. Fumilayo Olashende, Nike Omowurare, these are from Osun State. Koforola Buckner from Lagos State. They were all strong members of the Nadeko movement. Many grassroots women, they all supported OPC that time. And also, during that time, there was a little bit more gain. Koforola Buckner became the deputy governor for Bola Tinubu at the time, and we know how that ended. I don't want to talk more about that. Between 2003 2009, there was increase in number of women in Yoruba civil politics. 4 states, Lagos, Osun, Ekiti, and Ogun. They had women deputy governors that time. Also, we had women in House of Rep. Women went to Senate. So that was, most of the activities of the Yoruba women to that point. And today, we are still moving. Yoruba, we didn't stop, right? We did not stop. Because now we're talking about Yoruba nationalism and self-determination in the concept of Yoruba nationalism in the concept of self-determination. And we have Yoruba women again leading the battle. The young lady that was killed during the rally for Yoruba Nation movement in Lagos in the name of Jumoke. Again, we're seeing Yoruba women paying with their blood, actually, for the liberation of Yoruba. So we should always, always, always put our women first in these things that we're doing, because since the beginning of time in Yoruba land, we have always pushed them in the front. And it's a place of, it gives you the honor to you come behind them as the strong man that you are. I'm going to name some of these women that I have met personally in this Yoruba Nation movement. Madam Onitiri Abiola, she's very vocal. My humble sister, Fumi Yoruba Goddess. I'm going to say some of the badge that you have heard after I have after I've listed all the names. My sister Arabirin Alabi, she's not here now. Olori Vijay, Olori Ashabi, Edmari Kemi, Tiwa. Well, we are not best friends, but she's also very vocal for Yoruba nationalism. Madam Buki, Yoruba Nation Now. Madam Shola Salako, Otunba Folashade Olukoya. Madam Shoyinka, Madam Ainke, Madam Morenike, Arabirin Lola. There are so many Lola, but the Lola I'm talking about is the Lola in Tiwa F. Arabirin Yeni, Arabirin Mobola, Madam Ifeoluwa of TYF, Yawoko, Yanifa Ademama, Korikosu, Omoba Dejoke, Barrister Fumi, Princess Olamijulo of Yoruba Nation Global Directorate, and myself. These are a few women that, I have met. They didn't keep quiet. They kept talking. A lot of these women have been called terrible names. They call them prostitutes. They call them aggressive, disruptive, deceitful. They call us thieves. They say we're old women, dominating, stupid, poisonous, evil, wicked, gossipers. These are some of the ways in which we have rewarded these women. I know we can do better, including the Yoruba women that are also participating in a lot of this slandering. I know we can do better, and I know we will do better. So lastly, I'm going to mention on the issue of feminism. Yoruba women does not need the Western feminism, because we, our birthright it's like something is your, and of course, I will not, I should not forget to mention Lady K. Ifeoluwa. She was the very first woman, among other people that were taken in Chief Sunday Igboho's house. She spent several months in prison, and a lot of our men were, the 2 men were killed. Today I'm saluting the women, so please, if I don't mention the men name that have died in the cause of Yoruba Nation, it's not because I don't recognize their effort. It's just that today I'm paying homage to the women. Also, Chief Sunday Igboho's wife, also, she's one of those great women. Her husband was held in prison for several months just because he had the guts to fight for his people. Yoruba Nation movement, nationalism, it still is in its infancy. I still believe that we still have ways to go, but I want us to do it right, because I don't want us to always go back like our ancestors have done from the beginning of time, when they worked so hard and wasted their efforts, only to realize that they could have done better if they have incorporated their woman from the beginning the proper way. I want us to always remember that story in Odu Oshetura, because it seems like we're repeating the same thing over and over again. And like I said, I'm not a feminist. For people that may have some misconceptions about me, I don't subscribe to the Western idea of feminism, because I'm not oppressed. I'm not an oppressed person. So the people that feel oppressed are the ones that needed that feminism. I know my role as a woman, and I don't think that fighting a man or trying to say you want to destroy a man or eat a man, that's not the proper way. Those tends to come from a place of insecurity. Moving forward, what I wanted us to think about are some things that are going to be the challenge of Yoruba women in the coming years. And the very first is the threat to the economic powerhouse of the Yoruba women. I say this because if you look at it now, the marketplace of the Yoruba women is being critically challenged by neocolonialism. Think about the fact that China, if we're not careful, China will be the largest producer of gari in our space within the next 10 to 20 years. They have money, they have mechanization, and they have accumulated lots and lots of our lands, and they produce in gari. In fact, some gari that you are buying in the market now in the motherland are from China. When this particular trade goes away, what's going to happen to the Yoruba women? A lot of them will become unemployed. And the feudalism that has not really took foot in our area, in our land, is really because of the market women, believe it or not. When China take away that from them, I think we're going to see a serious problem, because this is happening already in some other African country whereby they've taken a foothold. I'm not anti-China, just to put it out there. I'm just putting it there that we need to start thinking of some urgent solutions to some problems that are coming as we're even moving towards this Yoruba nation that we're asking for. Another thing is Islamization and women's subjugation. We don't know how powerful this is until it happens to us. If the land becomes Islamized, the women power of the market will go away, because automatically these women need to retrieve all those in your face that they are doing. They won't be able to do it anymore. They will be pulled back. And this is going to have significant impact on us. I think for the first time, we're really going to be we're going to be challenged. The women that has been that powerhouse for us, we are about to lose them to some of the strong powers of the world, from neocolonialism and Islamization. These two will take your Yoruba women out, and when they're out, just imagine what that society will look like. I have come to the end of my chit chat today. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to talk. Again, this room was particularly dedicated to you, Yoruba goddess. You're bold, you're courageous, you're strong. I wish I could be like you sometimes. And most of all, you're very beautiful and you wear your hair naturally. That, to me, is the definition of strength. Thank you very much. Okay. So I think if we don't have...
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Does anybody have a question?
Okay, host, I think we can close the room, since we don't have any more comments or, I think people can go listen to the replay. There were a lot of information that was shared, and I hope that we will use it accordingly. Again, thank you, everybody. We truly appreciate it for coming to join us today. This is Think Yoruba First. We are a Yoruba nationalism movement organization. In everything you do, don't be afraid to be a Yoruba in the true sense of it. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Thank you all. Bye.
Show you like snail on a fresh bush meat to Sáré kó ọ̀dà your own. Yeah, make you go ọ̀dà your own. Sáré kó ọ̀dà your own.
Ayé ti wá dá dé báyìí o. Ṣé àwọn àgbà bọ̀ wọ́n ní bí ebi bá kúrò nínú iṣẹ́ ti bùṣe. Èyí ló mú àjọ adójútèbí ni Àkànní Akànjí farm pèsè àwọn èrè oko fún jíjẹ ní ìrọ̀rùn láìsí àbàwọ́n kan àti ìnira rárá. Àwọn èrè oko bíi àgbàdo, ẹ̀gẹ́, iṣu, ewébẹ̀ àti àwọn èso lóríṣiríṣi, ẹran ìgbẹ́, ẹja odò, ìgbín àti bẹ́ẹ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ lọ. A tún ń ta àwọn ohun jíjẹ fún àwọn oníbàárà wa tí wọn kò bá lówó lọ́wọ́ lásìkò àti ra oúnjẹ lọ́dọ̀ wa, ṣùgbọ́n tí wọn ó sì ṣe ìlérí wípé wọn yóò san owó náà padà kété tí wọ́n bá ti rí owó náà níparí oṣù. Pàpàǹbarì rẹ̀ ni wípé a tún lè kó èyíkéyìí nínú àwọn èrè oko lọ káàkiri àgbàlá ayé. Ẹ̀yin ẹ ṣáà ti kàn sí wa lórí ẹ̀rọ ìbánisọ̀rọ̀ Àkànní Akànjí farm 08034564577 àti 09077901303. Àkànní Akànjí farms àwà fún yín lọ́jọ́kọ́jọ́.